All right, well, it's good to be back at this conference. You're still young, I'm still old. Let's get over that. My wife's about to have a baby, though, maybe this weekend. So please pray for me if that happens, because if it does happen, I'll probably be in really big trouble. But I'm very happy to be here. Kevin, thanks for the introduction. I do associate burgers and fries with love. I don't know if everybody else is that way too, but there's some good things out there. All right. The talk, the title, Fighting Fire with Fire. It sounds kind of dramatic, but it is kind of dramatic, and it really is a fight, and there really is fire involved. And what we have is the fire of diabolical fury. And when we talk about contemporary rhetoric, you are not talking anymore about sort of civil discourse. A lot of times you're talking about really sort of vicious personal attacks. And tonight we want to discuss a little bit some strategies, how you deal with this, how you avoid unnecessary conflict, and how you properly engage in a Catholic manner for Catholic reasons. We're going to fight this fire of diabolical fury with the fire of charity. And that is the answer. Ultimately, it comes down to charity. We know that we win. Sometimes we win by losing, but we've got to convince other people of the victory of the cross. And that becomes difficult. Don't give up. But as we'll hear, you are going to be in situations which are profoundly disorienting. You're going to be talking with people with whom there is very little common ground, to the extent that you have opposing realities. And yet, the charge is still to reach out. The charge is still to try to convert. And the law is love, as you know. All right. What's on the menu? Going to give you a brief introduction to rhetoric. We will consider contemporary rhetoric, the current climate, some strategies. So how do you deal with hostile audiences? And then we'll deal with a couple of hot button issues. And we will necessarily get into some natural law and a bit of social revolution and a bit of sin. We need to talk about these issues because they will come up. They will come up. Could I know who, is there anyone under the age of 18 in this room? Okay. Anyone under the age of 16 in this room? Okay. We will deal with some issues that are sensitive, that we will necessarily deal with adult themes, but I think you can handle it. I call it the Annunciation problem. How old was Our Lady? What did she know? Innocence is not the same as ignorance. After a certain age, we can assume you know certain things, but we'll be discreet, as I expect you will be in conversation with people that oppose you. So, what is this business of communication? Making common. What we want to do is express and receive and share truth. Ideally, when people are communicating, they are making truth common. And when you are talking with somebody, which we do all the time, we are hoping that this is for their benefit. We want to bring them closer to truth. If you can throw in a few other transcendental absolutes like goodness and beauty, that's good too. You want to make the truth appealing. And a lot of this is about how you do that. So we're trying to make something common. We know that the highest form of this is your conversation with God. This is prayer. But most of the time, we're talking about sort of political discourse, right? The conversation between people. Now, why is this important? You, as Catholic people, are the antidote to hate. This is important because we don't want people to go to hell. You want to help them not go to hell. Let's figure out how to do that a little bit better. We are social creatures. Some people are more social than others. We talk all the time. I don't know, there are studies out there that tell us how many words we speak in a day. It's many. Sometimes we speak now with our thumbs, but we're communicating all the time. Do you know how many texts do we send in a day? Do you ever count that? I don't know. Is there a way? Does your phone show you that? I don't know. Maybe. But we're talking all the time. We are social creatures, and there is a difference between us. You may have noticed men and women don't communicate in quite the same way. This idea that we are the same is kind of absurd when you get into a conversation with the other, right? So she doesn't mean everything that she says, right? And he doesn't say everything that he means. Just because he's not communicating with words doesn't mean he's not trying to say something. So understanding the other is a big part of this. Not only communication, but reception, okay? And expression can be verbal and nonverbal as well. All right. So how do we get beyond just handing out the verbal pamphlet? So this business of the principles of application. And we'll talk about it when we get in more to the classical rhetoric, the sort of rules of engagement. But I call this the capstone of apologetics. What does that mean? Learning what to say is very important. So we hope by gaining a proper education through study that you have a firm grasp on the truth. I would prefer that you not take that truth and beat people over the head with it. So this happens, we've all heard it, and it's kind of cringe-worthy. We own the truth, and it's a great weapon that we wield with great satisfaction, and people go flying in the opposite direction. And we wonder why. Don't use truth as a weapon. So, what you say, very important. How you say it, sometimes even more important. That's a lot about rhetoric. You know what your grandmother used to say? If you can't say something nice, say it anyway. No, well, no. My grandmother said that. Maybe yours didn't. Say it louder, right? No. So sometimes you have to speak uncomfortable truths. You still can choose to speak these uncomfortable truths in a charitable fashion. That's the point. If you are quite sure that what you are going to say will not be heard, prudence comes into play, and perhaps it's best not to say it. Right? Come on in. Plenty of seats. Oh, he's leaving. What did I say? How did I say it? It's all wrong. When in doubt, pray. But prudence is a huge part of this. What you say, how you say it, and sometimes not saying it. And again, remember, we'll go over this a couple of times tonight, tailoring the message for a particular audience of one or many so that it will be heard is not the same as compromising the truth. Just remember that. Old axioms about you can get more flies with honey than you can with vinegar, right? You know, the old story about the sun and the wind having a competition to see who could get the man to take off his coat. And the wind goes first and howls and it's going to blow the coat off the man. And he just gets tighter and tighter and tighter wrapped around himself. And the sun comes out and glows and makes him sweat, and off comes the coat. That sort of gentle heat, that fire of charity. It's what it's all about. The good of the other. You could say that life well lived is based on what the other needs, not what you want. Give of yourself. St. Thomas, 3 movements of charity in the soul. First, get out of yourself. Get over yourself. All right? Give of yourself, stage 2. Sacrifice of yourself, stage 3. Always with the good of the other in mind. All right. Who is my neighbor? Interesting question. How do you read? How do you speak? Remember, there's a big difference between the Catholic approach to this question and the Protestant approach to this question. For the Catholic, I prove my love of neighbor by my love of God, by my defense of his laws. Okay? The Protestant inversion of this is what? I prove my love of God by loving my neighbor, and that love is based on how my neighbor tells me he wants to be loved. It's dangerous, because maybe my neighbor wants to be loved in a way which is not good for him. It's a sentimental approach rather than a charitable approach. But very, very different. So, what's the problem with all of this? Why can't we just speak and understand each other? Well, we could talk about the fact that there's an intellectual component and an emotional component to conversation, and sometimes arguments get heated, and it's not always rational. What's the problem? Well, there are several. Hippie chickens. I mean, you gotta like that. Contradiction. What's the contradiction? The contradiction is between the world and the cross. The world does not understand Christ. And the hippie chickens, we're talking about the 1960s, all hell literally broke loose. We are suffering from the revolutions of the 60s in an incredibly profound and pervasive way. So for those of you born after the year 2000, I mean, the 60s is a long time ago, 50 years. It'd be like me talking about World War II, Great Depression. It's interesting. What you were talking about, revolutions on every order. Social revolutions, sexual revolutions, educational revolutions, and oh yes, religious revolutions. Communication has not been the same since. Certainly rhetoric has not been the same since. And the biggest problem of all, there are opposing realities. We believe in supernatural reality. Pope St. Pius X wrote what is, in my estimation, the most important document of the 20th century, Pascendi Gregis Dominici. In it, he unmasks and condemns modernism. Modernism essentially is the denial of the supernatural. The idea that life is only a natural concern, and success is only the pursuit of natural pleasures, successes. It's devastating. But what conversation past a certain point can the caterpillar and the butterfly actually have? These are different realities. And yet, you, as the butterfly, are going to spend a lot of time talking to the caterpillar. The loss of the supernatural is devastating. This necessitates, in the mind of the caterpillar, the mistaking of natural means for supernatural ends, the replacement of supernatural ends with natural means. For this person, there is no such thing as sin, neither original sin or actual sin. It is difficult to find common ground. We must try. For this person, there is no concept of sacrifice, ultimate sacrifice. There is no eternity. It is difficult to find common ground. We must try. But that is a lot of times what you're going to be dealing with. That's a hard conversation to have, really from both ends, if you think about it. But you must be empathetic, you must be understanding, because your advantage is that you've been there. As the butterfly, you understand what it's like to be the caterpillar. The caterpillar can't conceive of what it's like to be a butterfly. And it's hard. How can you convince someone of the supernatural? It starts with showing them charity. All right. Rhetoric. It's a big topic. It's a big topic. And this is the guy, Aristotle. Wrote some notes on rhetoric, founded a discipline. He's called the master of those who know. Dante says this. That's the quote. So Dante, who wrote the Divine Comedy, says Aristotle is the master of those who know. And he writes the Rhetoric, and it's in 3 books. We're going to go through this pretty quickly. It is a counterpart to dialectic and philosophy. So dialectic, this business of reasoning out. Philosophy, this study of ideas. And rhetoric, yes, it's the art of persuasion. It's the use of these tools for the sake of moving the other, one way or the other. You could say that it's a sort of argumentation or debate. But the idea is that the proper application of rhetoric results in some movement. And there are, in Book 1, that about which one speaks, 3 kinds of rhetoric that Aristotle talks about. Political, forensic, and what's called epideictic. So this all breaks out wonderfully. He's if you're a St. Thomas Aquinas guy, you would feel very comfortable reading Aristotle. It's that same sort of very, very logical. Everything's broken out, lots of bullet points. Very clear. So political rhetoric, this is trying to exhort people. This is a call to future action. I'm going to try to convince you to do something in the future. And this is expedience. For forensic or legal rhetoric, this deals with events that have taken place, and we are trying to establish the truth of the past for the sake of justice. Some wrong needs to be righted, something needs to be done as a result of a past action, and we need to convince people what the truth is so we can do the right thing. Epideictic speech is speeches of praise or even censure. That's the negative part. Can anyone think of one of those? Would you ever give a speech of praise? Sure. If you've ever given a best man speech, that is a speech of praise. But that used to be something that happened fairly frequently. People would give speeches of praise. All right. He also talks about the available means of persuasion. What are these? Fancy words. You've probably all heard them before. Ethos, pathos, logos. Everyone heard those before? Yeah. What do they mean? So ethos, one of the available means of persuasion, is your credibility. You need to establish this when you are speaking to somebody. Why do I need to believe what you're saying? What makes you believable? Why are you credible? Ethos. You have to establish that. You've got to work to gain it. You've got to fight hard not to lose it. Once you've lost it, it's very hard to regain it. which is why you always speak truthfully, and don't, as we would say, drive into smoke. If you don't know what's in there, don't go charging in. If you don't know something, say so. It's one of the most powerful things you can say in an argument. I don't know. I'll try to find out. Don't make things up. You get yourself into trouble. Pathos, the business of moving the emotions. This is where, as a rhetorician, you really make your money. You want to establish a certain feel in a conversation, and you want to drive the emotions of the conversation. You want people not only to know what you want them to know, but you want them to feel what you want them to feel. We hope that's a good thing. But pathos is a sort of manipulation for the good of the other. But you want to direct the not only the emotional atmosphere, but the rhetorical temperature, so to speak, of a conversation. You'll understand that. Sometimes conversations get pretty hot. You want to try to keep the rhetorical temperature down as low as you can. Because the higher it gets, the more likely there are, it's going to be that emotions are involved as well as intellect, maybe as much as intellect. The last one of these means of persuasion is called logos. And this is the proof of the truth of your argument. You've got to know what you're talking about. Know your stuff. So ethos, pathos, logos, and then you look like that. Because you finally learned what ethos, pathos, and logos are. Look at that guy. He looks very happy. All right. Books 2 and 3. Book 2, application and audience. Those to whom one speaks. And this is really important. Because you can say the same thing to 4 different people and get 4 different reactions. You can also hear 4 different people speak and it sounds completely different. So, Pete, I got a half a bottle of water here. We're not leaving this room until I find out who took half of this water. You know that guy. I love water. This is the coolest thing ever. Somebody gave me half a bottle of water. That is so neat. Wow, that's great. Pete, did you do that? Thanks. That's super. We know that guy. Half my water is gone. Half my life is gone. I didn't deserve a whole bottle of water anyway. So we know all those guys, right? We talk about this in terms of temperament, right? The choleric, the guy who's he's not really officially mad at you, it just sounds that way, right? The sanguine, everything is a sunshiny day. It's wonderful, it's a beautiful energy. You just got to make sure they don't get too distracted. If there are sanguines out there, well, I think we have cookies. Don't we have cookies for the sanguines, Kevin? That's great. The melancholic, they're not really mopey. Well, yeah, they kind of are, but that's okay. You need us in your life. You need us in your life. It's wonderful to stay down there where it's cool and dark and quiet. I'm perfectly happy down there. It's not a matter of being mopey. And I'm actually quite useful to you. It's funny. Every now and then, a sanguine will float down. What are you doing down here? Let's get you back up to the surface. Right? We're useful to each other. But only when we understand each other. And the phlegmatic, God bless him. You want that guy as your accountant. I mean, it's just never, ever going to stop. It's wonderful. The phlegmatics, They take a lot of abuse. It's a great temperament. They're all great temperaments. You got to know yourself. You got to know the other. Really important that you understand the person you're speaking with. Huh? Don't think about temperaments. To associate them with sports. Whatever you need to do. I mean, what's the choleric? It's like MMA, right? I'm gonna crush you, and after I've crushed you, I want to talk some more so I can crush you some more. That was fun, right? The sanguine, it's like soccer. Everyone runs around happily. No one wins because it's a tie, and then you get a juice box, right? Huh? Phlegmatic, I'm like Tai Chi? Really? It looks like it's a very sort of slow motion thing. You know what Tai Chi is, by the way? Tai Chi is a it's a killing art in slow motion. Oh, it really is. Anyone do Tai Chi? That's for real. If you sped up Tai Chi, I don't know, 50 times, you'd smash somebody to pieces. Right? And the melancholic, I don't know, what sport would that be? An ultra marathon walking to the death. It's great. Understand your audience. It's a good thing. All right, book 3. Again, still in the rhetoric. This is important. Go through, get Aristotle. Read him. He's good, smart guy, real smart. Wonderful. In book 2, all these personality types, and you might deal with this. How to deal with the old, how to deal with the young, how to deal with the girls and boys, all this sort of stuff. It's great. Style and delivery. It is not enough to know what to say. We must also know how to say it. And sometimes, how not to say it. Again, will your truth be heard? If it won't be, if you're quite sure it won't be heard, consider not speaking it. It's a very powerful thing, discretion. Knowing when not to say. Oh, I'm going to show you her. Oh boy, there she is. Rhetoric. You will do what I say. All right, temperament type, what do you think? Phlegmatic? Poor girl. Maybe she just dropped something really heavy on her toe. I don't know. Ooh, it's time for the gratuitous beauty interlude. You didn't know you were going to get this, do you? All right, close your eyes. That's a tease. You want to hear the whole thing? Tough. You got to wait to the end of the speech. I'm almost sure you've never heard that piece before. It's unbelievable. Isn't that wonderful? It is. All right. Sorry. We got something to do here. Contemporary rhetoric. Old rhetoric, let's say it was motivated by charity, at least respect. Not anymore. And we wanted to establish truth. What goes on now? Well, you could say it's motivated by bad will, by ignorance, a desire to crush opposing viewpoints. If you don't agree with me, I will destroy your life. And they're not joking. And it's never been easier to destroy someone's life. www.destroyyourlife.com. Just say the wrong thing to the wrong person and you run a great risk. You got to be careful. And, oh, by the way, a real total detachment from reality. This is the rhetorical climate. You've got to be careful. All right, the death of good faith. It used to be when you were having an argument, you would assume good faith on the part of the other. We really can't assume that anymore. This is the loss of charity. Again, it's a rejection of sacrifice, of real ethics. Right? Ethics are now situational. It is gladiatorial. I call the current mode of rhetoric sort of schoolyard rhetoric. It's either nanny nanny boo boo, or it's just vicious and violent. Charity's gone. And what used to be, remember, innocent until proven guilty? Now you're guilty until proven guilty. Yeah, your innocence, as far as the other is concerned, when you're in a hostile situation, is not even an option. You've got to know that that's what you're going to face. The death of the analogic mode. Oh, goodness. How to explain that? Where's Weaver? Laura, where's Weaver? Here he is. Richard Weaver, wonderful, relatively contemporary philosopher, mid-20th century. Quote, "The scientific criticism of Greek mythology, which may be likened to the scientific criticism of the myths of the Bible in our own day, produces at best a boorish sort of wisdom. It is a limitation to suppose that the truth of the story lies in its historicity. The boorish sort of wisdom seeks to supplant poetic allegation with fact, just as an archaeologist might look for the foundations of the Garden of Eden. But while this sort of search goes on, the truth flies off on wings of imagination and is not recoverable until the searcher attains a higher level of pursuit." Isn't that wonderful? We've lost that. We think we're so much more advanced because everything is factual. Was there really a man that traveled between Jericho and Jerusalem and found a beat-up guy? What was his name? What was the name of the inn? Show me the invoice of how much he paid to take care of this man. Otherwise, you really have very little to talk to me about. There's no truth in it because there's no fact. There's no historicity. And off goes the truth. And off goes charity. Interesting. Analogic mode is very important. It's a mechanistic rejection of the connection between act and ends, morality. Prove to me morality. There's only expedience. You're getting a sense of the nature of this thing. It's ultimately inhuman. And oh, by the way, the loss of reason is charming, isn't it? Logic, anyone? No. How about volume and the viciousness of your attack? And what about reality? I don't like the online reality thing. I know it's a part of your life. I know it's here to stay until somebody unplugs it. I don't know. Is that going to happen? Is there a Chicken Little out there who thinks that someone's going to unplug the whole thing and it'll all come crashing down? Maybe it will. Maybe it will. Don't know. Understand this. It's global, it's instantaneous, and it's permanent. You do know that. You have to. And it's amoral and it's anonymous. Other than that, by all means, please be careful out there. Does anyone try to, did you try to find me on Facebook? No, you didn't. Have you ever tried to find me on Facebook? No, I'm not there. I'm the only one left. Convinced of it. I don't know. What am I missing? What am I missing? I don't know. You'll tell me. It's all right. All right. So, here we are. How do you deal with the hostile audience? Let's talk about it. So, principles of self-defense. Situational awareness. Okay? Avoid ambush. Don't pick the wrong fights. Bad things happen when you do or say silly things with silly people in dangerous places. Avoid those situations if you can. Okay? Keep your wits about you. Try always to keep the intellect one step ahead of the emotions. And it's very difficult when things get heated up. And as I said, control the rhetorical temperature as much as you can. Try to keep it cool if you can. But if you have to fight, fight to win. Really. If it's a physical fight, fight dirty. Absolutely. Chairs, bottles, bats, cats, dogs. I don't care what you have to do. If it's an intellectual, emotional fight, fight fair. Even if you have to lose. That's a very, very powerful message you can send. Conceding defeat, sometimes necessarily in an argument, backing away, can send a very powerful message. Not about compromising truth. Let them win. But say, look, I'm not going to deny truth, but I'm not going to argue with you. Very powerful. Know what winning and failure actually mean. Failure is compromise of the truth. Failure is losing the opportunity ever to make an impact on the soul. Sometimes you got to live to fight another day. All right. Principles, strategies, how do we do this? A few things to think about. Everyone has something in common. Address the positive element. All right? Everyone has a positive relationship in their life. Everyone has some common ground. Find it. You love your cat? I love my cat too. That's great. Let's talk about the fact that you're upset. Sorry that you're sad. Let's discuss. Keep the temperature low. Listen. A great part of conversation is listening. And you're going to have to be careful here. A great strategy to employ when you're talking with somebody, repeat to them what they have said to you. So I just want to be clear that I understand you. I heard you say. It's very powerful. You're not taking them out of context, you're actually restating what they say. If you expose yourself sometimes to taking the occasional hit, or even taking the occasional loss, that is not the same as humiliation. Sometimes it's very powerful to show a little bit of weakness. All right. I'll give you an example of what not to say. Here's a moral issue.
Hi, Lauren and Greg. What's up?
We're getting the day started with Athena's Greek yogurt. Later, we're going to ride bikes.
Wonderful.
And go to the...
Let's see what Yaya thinks.
Are you two married?
No.
But you live together.
Yeah.
You are going to hell.
Don't worry, kids. At least Yaya approves of you eating Athenos Greek yogurt. Because Athenos is made the traditional Greek way, never using preservatives or artificial flavors. Athenos, maybe the only thing approved by Yaya.
Anyway, so here's the thing. Yaya's not actually technically wrong there. So what she is saying, provided they don't change what they're doing, is actually true. Probably not an effective way to go about saying it. What are the chances that Lauren and Greg are going to take Yaya's words to heart? Probably very slim. Now, it's pretty good acting there. Clearly it made an impact, but that's probably not the way to go about it. Here's what happens in a situation where you're dealing with a hostile confrontation. You are occasionally going to be set up to fall into a trap. Be very careful. You are allowed to have terms defined, and I would say you are allowed to cry foul. Say, look, is this a trap? Are you setting me up to walk into? Because if it is, I don't want any part of this conversation. You are not required to walk into an ambush. And you are allowed to ask whether or not you're being set up. It's true. Very powerful. Look, if you're looking for something to incriminate me, or if this is a setup, I want no part of this conversation. So remember that. And define terms. I want to understand how you understand this concept. Give me your definition of this thing. Let's see if we can find some common ground. Let's see why we disagree. Define your terms. And remember, you did not invent the Catholic definition. Such a powerful thing. Such a comfort. It's ultimate stability. Right? Catholic doctrine is bedrock, and you didn't invent it. So powerful, just to sort of take be a confessor. Say, this is Catholic truth. I'm not allowed not to believe this Catholic truth. I'm sorry it doesn't square with your view of the world. But you didn't invent that. And you know it's never going to move. Use it. Use it. So, natural law. Oh boy, where's Phaser? Laura, where's Laura? Hi, Laura. She hates it when I do that. She's right over there. This is Edward Phaser. He's great. And this is I think this is just a blog post. Quote, everyone knows that it is in the nature of a squirrel to gather nuts and the like, and to dart about in a way that will make it difficult for predators to catch it. And thus, it is good for it to do these things, and bad for it, for whatever reason, if it fails to do them. The nature of these things entails certain ends, the realization of which constitutes their flourishing as the kinds of things they are. So squirrels are things. Right? We talk about natural law. It's very important that we understand that part of the difficulty is when you say nature, what does that mean? Well, when we're talking about nature from a philosophical standpoint, it could mean a number of things. We could be talking about what a thing is from birth, right? That's a sort of nature. We could be talking about the natural world, things that happen in nature. We could talk about certain intrinsic qualities in its nature to fill in the blank. And there's a sort of metaphysical aspect, the nature of our relationship or the nature of our disagreement. So part of the problem with people talking about nature is that there can be a little bit of ambiguity in terms of what it means. So Phaser's talking about the sort of old school Thomistic view of natural law. It's very important that we understand that not everybody's hearing that word the way we intend it. Define. Because ultimately it becomes a moral issue, which involves intellect and will. Right? When we're talking about things beyond squirrels and nuts. Quote, "The will itself has in its natural end the pursuit of the good. And determining what is in fact good is part of the natural end of the intellect." Close quote. Again, back to the squirrel to help us understand. Quote, "If a squirrel were rational, it would be natural and good for him to will to escape predators and to gather nuts for the winter, and unnatural and bad for him to offer himself up to predators and to eat only toothpaste or stones. And the latter would be unnatural and bad for him, whatever was the reason why he willed these things. Brain damage, genetic anomalies giving rise to odd desires, bad squirrel upbringing, squirrel peer pressure." He's having a little fun here. "The influence of squirrel pop culture, arguments from squirrel philosophers who were hostile to the natural law," or whatever. They would also be unnatural and bad for him, however strongly he wanted to eat the toothpaste and to offer himself to the predators. And even if he found the idea of eating nuts and fleeing from predators repulsive. So his specific inclination, the rational squirrel, and if you've ever seen squirrels at your bird feeder, you have a sneaking suspicion that there's some level of they know just how to get what they want. So he's saying, even if he has inclinations which to him seem natural or second nature, and we'll get to that later, we talk about vice, becomes second nature, doesn't mean that it is natural. In other words, it does not exist as a fulfillment of his flourishing for what he is. Very important. Just because it seems natural to you doesn't make it part of the natural law. Finally, last quote from Phaser. Maybe I can figure out a way to get this to you. It's a nice article. So for the natural law theorist, quote, "Certain things are natural for us in the sense of tending to fulfill those ends, the realization of which constitutes our flourishing as the kinds of thing we are." Very Thomistic, this fellow. "But perhaps it is also natural for us, in a different sense, the sense of being a weakness to which we are prone given the limitations of our nature, for us to want to deny that we are subject to natural law." It's ironic, isn't it? "To that extent, at least, we are all natural lawyers, but of a rather sleazy kind, seeking not justice, but to find any way we can to get ourselves off the hook." Yeah, it's well said. So, again, starts with the denial of the supernatural, the difficulties, rejection of supernatural ends, replacement with natural means, a purposeful detachment or a purpose detached from morality, and an elevation of satisfaction, appetite, denial of humanity, really. Ultimately, we become beasts. Man detached from morality is very close to being a beast. All right. A few hot buttons. Let's press them. So, some social revolution issues. Remember our little rhetoric gal? We'll call her a feminist warrior. Okay? This is a trap. What's the trap with feminism? It's not about equality, is it? It's about domination. It's about inversion. It's about inversion. Not about equality. Try to find something positive, even if it has to be a negative. Try to find something negative, even if there's a positive aspect to it, right? Work your way through these things. So the sort of negative positive here is that you do not oppose equality. You don't. All right? Are women equally capable of becoming wage slaves? Absolutely. Is she better at doing a specific task than I am? Quite possibly. So it's not about capability. It's about nature. What is it that makes a woman? What is it that makes a man? Essentially. So, what do you oppose? I oppose abuse, subjugation. I oppose women being treated like chattel. I oppose that very profoundly. I believe in the equal dignity of women. But I can't support the denial of an intrinsic female nature. I can't support the denial of what it is to be a woman by her nature. Ultimately, it's a denial of woman's real strength. And it's the denial of the feminist ideal of a woman, which, regardless of what anyone says, boils down to some pretty horrible things. She will deny submission, proper submission, within marriage, and sacrifice. She objectifies herself by giving away her sex, thinking that's empowering or liberated. She kills her children. That's the feminist model of a woman. That's not deniable. Those aspects, not needing marriage, having sexual liberation, and having the right to an abortion, reproductive choice, these are pillars of feminism. Define what those things are. You'll have to talk about it. You'll have to talk about divorce. How do you speak about divorce? Again, understand the audience. Sometimes you're going to have to explain these things to little children. I was 13 when my parents got divorced. Had no effect on me whatsoever. Isn't that interesting? It's devastating. As a parent, you think, my word. Whew. You do not oppose a certain right to marital happiness. You do oppose dangerous domestic situations. You don't want women and children, or men, whoever, to be in dangerous situations. And yet, we must understand what marriage is and why it's so important. What's the silver lining for the non-believer? You're raising your children. The satisfaction of sacrifice is remarkable. Thank goodness most of our children don't hold us too much in the wrong for not being perfect parents. Anyone out there have perfect parents? You're raising your hands inside. Yeah. It's hard work. It's hard work. Someday you'll understand, your parents tell you, right? As your eyes roll. Oh, I'm sick of hearing that. May be true. It may be true. Gender theory, anyone? Oof. Careful. This is a big trap. This is so raw. This is so fresh. The fury is raging. Be careful. All right. What don't we deny? We do not deny that, look around you. There is a sort of spectrum of masculinity and femininity. This exists in the natural world. We don't deny that. There are manly men and slightly less manly men. Right? There are girly girls and there are sort of tomboys. There's a spectrum. Girly girls. There's my daughter. Wow. The Ice Princess. 9 months old. Playing the drop C game. Did I tell you this story last year? She's great. Rebecca Therese. Becca Cheese. Drop the spoon. Pick it up. Becca. Drop the spoon again. Pick it up again. Now, Rebecca, don't drop that spoon again. Oh boy. So you pick it up and you give her one of those. And her response? Yeah. When the boys come around. For my one daughter, I'll be cleaning my pistol. For Rebecca, I'll just leave me a forwarding address so I know where to send the pieces. So there's a spectrum. Personalities, qualities, characteristics. You don't deny that. What you do deny is that there's a disconnection of biological sex and the idea of gender as a philosophical construct, which is based on individual perception. You have to deny that. All right. Modesty? See what Yahya has to say about modesty. Oh, no. Laura, what'd I do? Go back there? Oh, no. I'm going to get you on camera whether you want to be or not. Oh, no, there it is.
You dress like a prostitute.
Did she just call me a prostitute?
No, Yaya would never do.
Prostitute.
Now, again, objectively speaking, yeah. Will that truth be heard? Probably not. So, you do not oppose beauty. We exalt beauty. Beauty is, well, in a word, beautiful. We're big fans. We do oppose danger. And objectification. Why would you objectify yourself? There's a line, obviously. But you've got to stay on one side of it. And ladies, if you had any idea. If you had any idea. Do you have any idea? No, you have no idea. You have no idea. We try. We really do. And most of the time, we deal with the temptation. But what is seen cannot be unseen. So every woman in the eyes of a man is an individual, a person, human being with a soul you want to respect, but also a potential object of desire. And there's a balance between those two things. And with proper modesty, it's almost entirely about your being, who you are. As immodesty comes into the question, you tip that balance. It's shocking sometimes. As a teacher, you know, the students will have there'll be a special event, right? They're getting dressed up. And some of them know better than others how to dress up, right? And it's just someone you've seen so many times. All of a sudden you've got to catch yourself. See, no, it's not it's the same person. Because that balance has been tipped. And you've got to fight against your instinct, very strong, to objectify. So, help a brother out. Dignity is ultimate. Remember, a veiled thing is a holy thing. But beauty's for real. We don't deny the beauty. All right? We don't wear gunny sacks. For a reason. I'm sure they're very itchy, too. I've never... It'd be awful. Other hot button issues. Fornication. How do you deal with this? Again, consider your audience. I would suggest using analogy. You do not oppose birthday cake. You do oppose eating birthday cake if it's not your birthday. Or if it's someone else's cake. We oppose that. It's not right. Even though birthday cake is great. Remember, you get to pick your own birthday cake. It's wonderful. But if it's not your birthday, it's not your cake, don't eat it. Other sin issues. This is hard, but it's going to come up. Again, most of the conversations you have that are difficult, that require rhetorical finesse, are going to involve some pretty predictable things. You might have to talk about contraception, abortion, pornography. Okay? You do not, for instance, oppose sex, but you know its place. You know its purpose. You do oppose the objectification of women. You really do. How is it that feminists support, ultimately, through sexual liberation, the objectification of women? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. It's very dangerous. One last one. Marriage equality? Again, very dangerous. They will set traps. You oppose neither marriage nor equality. This is true. But remember what we said about being confessional. You cannot allow a definition other than that of the Church. I am a Catholic. I cannot allow a definition of marriage other than that of the Church. You could bring up the importance of marriage to society, but that's usually not the issue. We could go on. Maybe we will. Tomorrow, Q&A session. How do you deal with these issues? Again, I'm giving you some principles. Find a positive aspect. Find some common ground. Know when to say when. Know your audience. And always charity. Always charity. You love their humanity. That's bigger than they're trying to enforce your endorsement of their activity. It's crucial. You don't love their situation. You don't love their activity. You love them because they're immortal souls created for God. How you speak can make all the difference in the world. This is the gratuitous beauty postlude. Closer, so close. There it is, magical. Thanks.